Is Quantum Break good or bad? I want to be honest here and say I don't know how to feel about this game. Quantum Break was one of the games I've been looking forward to since the review of the Xbox One, with Remedy calling this the best of Max Payne and Alan Wake, so what could go wrong? For the review, I decided to go with the Xbox One version, since I don't have Windows 10 and I'm pretty sure my computer couldn't handle this in the first place. But after hearing about how crappy the Windows store is and the PC ports are, I probably dodged a bullet. Anyway, the story of Quantum Break is that a black hole experiment has gone wrong and now time is breaking down. You play as Jack Joyce, who has been caught up in the middle of the mess. Due to the experiment, Jack has now been granted the power to control time, and now it is up to Jack to save time itself while fighting against the evil Monarch Corporation. The game is split up into several chapters just like Alan Wake, but instead of watching the Botox facial animations just like in Alan Wake, you're watching a combination of in-game graphics and live-action cutscenes. This has to be my first major gripe with the game. Since you can only watch the shows online, you have to stream or download in order to watch them. As a guy that's on a limited prepaid internet service, I can only watch so much of the show. And you should have seen the look on my face when I saw how much memory it took to download. Luckily, you can still skip them if you don't want to be bothered watching. And I recommend it too, since live action segments are capable of putting an insomniac to sleep. I was actually looking forward to the live action show since it takes the perspective of the villain. But it turns out we're just watching these boring assholes. But more on the villains later. Shooting works the same as all modern-day cover-based shooters, but Quantum Break mixes up the trend by throwing in time powers, and you get most of them right from the start, which caught me off guard. Normally you would start out with one or two powers and the player unlocks the rest of them later on in order to ease the player into the game. I appreciate it since now I have total freedom to use my powers straight from the get-go. Jack has a total of 6 powers. Time vision works just like Eagle Vision from Assassin's Creed, but you can spot enemies behind cover and find hidden power-ups. Time Stop freezes enemies while you can unload your bullets into them for more damage. Time Dodge gives you a burst of speed which you can use to close distances, jump to cover, or use it to stun enemies. Time Rush slows down time around you. Time Shield creates a bubble around Jack that freezes time in that area. Also, summoning it allows you to push back enemies. And Time Blast, which you can use to blow up a selected area, which I have no idea what that has to do with time. While they are not that deep in terms of mechanics, they are still extremely fun to use. Bad guys are seriously aggressive even on normal difficulty. I stay a couple of seconds behind cover and they're up my rear end in an instant. In fact, I found myself outside of cover more times than in it, forcing me to adapt to the situations and use my powers a lot. I've read in interviews with Remedy saying they were aiming for the player to be constantly on the move, so I guess Jack doesn't have the time to be waiting around,
I'll open the door for you.
Okay, stay in contact. Find a radio. I'll be on channel 3.
I didn't notice this on my first playthrough, but apparently there was no hipfire, which seems like a step back from Alan Wake. Most of the time you would be out of cover and in the enemy's face, and while I don't use hipfire all that much in games, I still find that the game could have benefited from. The bad side of combat is that the pacing always breaks up just as soon as it gets good. Quantum Break has way too many walking sections that take away too much freedom from the player. Nothing breaks the mood harder than going crazy on a wave of enemies only to have everything taken away from you an instant later. Alan Wake did this better when you could choose to either confront the enemy or just run straight to the nearest safe point. Alan Wake knew when to throw enemies at you. The player could most of the time control the pacing. Quantum Break just forces you out of combat whenever it feels like it. Quantum Break also follows one of the worst ways of telling a backstory. Walls of text. Like I'm going to go out of my way to read all of this. This is like Wikipedia the game. Unless you're going to have people talking over the gameplay, I'm not going to bother reading it. Alan Wake tried to do the same thing, but they only did it half right by having Alan himself read it while in the menu. When you are not in combat, you can use your superpowers in puzzle-like platforming situations. I say puzzle, it's more like trying to figure out what you can climb or not. During these, you will encounter time stutters that repeat hazards that are stuck in a time loop. These are pretty simple to go by. Freeze, target, time, rush, easy. Platforming can be fun when it decides to work. Jack has got to have one of the most piss-poor attempts at jumping I have seen in a game. Yes, kick the wall, Jack. I'm sure that will solve our problems. Considering how good the physics are in this game, it's kind of disappointing to see this. I do have to say, I do love the effects that are put into everything. It really makes me appreciate the small details. But I'm not fond of the color grading that's used here. Everything looks too grey. The environments are not that interesting as well. Nothing like the spooky forest from Alan Wake, but it does look like a graphically appealing game with a proper animation budget this time. The frozen time segments are pretty cool, but still feel like a missed opportunity. At the start of the game, there's a moment where you can take all the weapons off of the soldiers on the level, and I really wish there was more game design like that. Stuff like that impacts the way you play. They had a good thing going with it too with the bridge level, with the whole level constantly changing while you're on the move, but mainly it's just used to fight more bad guys. Getting back to the villains, at points she can play as Paul Serene, the behind-the-scenes leader of Monarch who also has time powers just like Jack, but can also see glimpses into the future and create two possible outcomes from it. A spoiler alert should be here. I feel like Serene is such a wasted villain. Normally when you have bad guys with the same skills as our hero, you would expect some pretty badass boss fights. But man was I worked up for some disappointment. After the first confrontation of Serene kicking Jack around at the start of the game, we never really see any more moments like that. After that, he just stopped being threatening. When you work your main villain up to be this powerful badass, I expect these boss fights to live up to expectations. I may not be a game developer, but here is a note you people should take. Don't throw in waves of enemies and call it a boss fight. It's a shame too, because he was an interesting villain, and the actor himself wasn't half bad either. Even when writing for this review, I still can't make up my mind about this game. When it's good, it's great, but when it's not, it's really not. The aim for Quantum Break having a tie-in for a short TV series was a neat idea, but failed in its execution. The combat is damn fun, but god damn it, the game has so much slow walking and being stuck in rooms. A story around time control and science fiction? I love it, but damn is this game short at around 5 hours. As a huge fan of Alan Wake, I came into Quantum Break with high expectations, but I only came out half and half. I really hope that when Remedy does make a sequel, we can expect a much better game. But at the moment, I'm going to continue waiting patiently until they announce Alan Wake 2.
There's no words to describe it. Will was gone, but he was all around me. This entire secret life he'd never talked about, everything he tried to protect me from, it surrounded me. A puzzle, trapped in broken time. We all thought he wasted his research grant, his career, obsessing over some failed experiment. That's what he led us to believe. What he built there, it never failed. It works. It works.